Alright, so you get the idea that I live in Somalia now. We've banged on enough about that. But how did that even happen? Why not pick a country that has a bit better PR, that hasn't been Captain Phillips, and that hasn't been Black Hawk Downed in cinemas near you recently? So I'm doing this video because you guys voted for it. I asked you guys in our YouTube community what kind of a video you wanted me to do next, and you guys chose this. So in this video, I'm going to spill that ambulo, as it were, and give you guys the full story about how myself, my wife and our children ended up calling Mogadishu our home. My wife and I have always had the vision to move to a Muslim majority country at some point in our marriage. Even from our very earliest conversations, we actually discussed that. But after we had children that were growing up, and after we saw some of the changes that are going on politically and socially in the UK around extreme leftist ideologies being more and more prevalent, and of course these ideologies are completely contrary to our values and completely alien to Islam, we really started to think about how we can foster a better life and a better upbringing for our children. So where do you go? Where's best? This is really a question about where's best for you and what kind of a life you can build in a particular place. And that, of course, is going to be based on a number of factors, like visas is going to be a big one. Visas and residency is something you need to consider. What kind of a support network are you going to have around you, especially if you have children? And do you speak the language? These are all things that are going to make the answer to where the best country is for you to move completely different for everybody. If I'm being honest, I was a bit nervous in the early stages of the planning. My preference in the beginning was Turkey. Turkey's a country that I have a real soft spot for. It's a country that you can fly to very easily from the UK. It'd be no problem at all for my relatives to come and visit me, and I wouldn't stick out like a sore thumb like I kind of do here in Mogadishu. We also considered Egypt. Loads of people go to Egypt to raise their children. Loads of people go to Egypt, especially for Quran and for the Arabic language. It's a country that I've been to before, and my wife and I both speak the Arabic language. And likewise, we considered the UAE, we considered Saudi Arabia, we considered Morocco, we considered Qatar. But eventually I realized that if it wasn't Somalia, then we'd probably just be back in the UK in 6 months. So let me take you back in time to 2022 in the month of March. I was sat at the kitchen table with my wife and children. We were eating our baris and hilib of a usual evening, and I looked up at my wife and I said, Bisbeh Saraba, Mosme Allah. But after we'd eaten and ga'antain or sadaqai, I sat down and I was on Skyscanner looking at these different flights to these different places, how much they cost, when we can book them, and how we might actually plan this trip. So I said to my wife, do you know what? Bismillah. Let's just book a 1-month trip in August and let's just see how it goes. Worst case scenario, we can just come back and pick up where we left off and go back to the drawing board. So at this point, we've booked a return flight, right? And to be honest with you as well, when you leave the UK and you go to Somalia, if on your ticket you don't have a return flight, sometimes that can cause some issues, right? Not usually for Somali people, but when I've flown from the UK to Somalia, they've asked me for a return ticket. They've said, when are you coming back? Let's see a return ticket for someone like you. So was this a hijrah or was it just a holiday? Well, it kind of had the benefits of both in our minds, right? For us planning, we're able to have the security of this, of knowing, look, we have return flights, but as far as I was concerned, this was a hijrah. This was a hijrah with a way out. It wasn't a holiday as far as I was concerned. I did my research as much as I could. I went onto YouTube and watched some of these travel vlogs in Mogadishu. I called up my friends and family in Mogadishu and said, how is it meet someone like me walking to the masjid? Can I go to the gym? Can I go to restaurants? Is it all right for me to actually be there? And what would my life be like? Eventually, I told my mum and dad. I kind of let that slip to them a bit more gradually. I told them I was thinking about booking a trip at some point. A month later, said, you know what, we might actually book the flights now. And then a few weeks later, let it slip to them kind of in a more concrete way that, you know, we've got return flights booked, so I might just be back in a month. And then before we knew it, the day of our flights had come around. I sold my car that day, and we boarded a flight that evening to go to Mogadishu. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, I was terrified. I'd never even been to Somalia before. I'd been to a few East African countries, and I'd been to the Middle East. I'd studied Arabic for a year in Palestine, so I was kind of familiar with areas that had some level of conflict or a history of conflict. But nonetheless, I was terrified. And you can be sure that on that flight, I had some doubts. I sat down a number of times and thought, what do we do if this all goes wrong? Where are we going to move? How am I going to solve this problem for our family? Believe me, those thoughts went through my head a number of times on those flights. But was it not similar to this for the Muhajirun who accompanied the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in their hijrah from Mecca to Medina? In fact, was it not even harder for them? These days, we even have these travel vlogs. We can go on Google and YouTube and we can search for people who have been there before. We have Google Maps where we can drop a little man on certain streets and hotels and see what it's like there. We have family members who we can call up over there. But the companions who travelled and migrated with the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, none of them had any of that. But these days, so many of us really just lack the tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we make this decision to migrate to His lands. So whilst I had some wiswas, whilst I had some thoughts about what if this doesn't happen, I didn't kind of falter in my certainty on that this was a good thing. It was a good thing for us to go and at least give it our best shot. So as we drove from the airport to our house, you can imagine the kinds of thoughts that are going through our mind. Me explaining to our children what's going on here, why there are donkeys and cows walking around everywhere and stuff. Because here in Mogadishu, there's tons of like farm animals actually in the city, right? Like in a normal day, in a bajaj through the city, you'll see camels and donkeys and cows and goats and stuff. So it was such a shock, but it was also so beautiful. When we arrived at our house, my brother-in-law Zeki, who lives here, he took me up to the roof in the building that we live in. And that moment, standing on the roof in Mogadishu, looking over the city that I'd now call my home, that was really one of the best moments of my life. Looking over a city where people were going about their lives, hearing the sound of the adhan echo throughout the streets, and seeing children play in the streets, really made me feel like this was a place that we'll start to call home. I want to say thank you all so much for helping us reach 40,000 subscribers on this channel as well recently. That truly means the world to me. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, then please do so, because I'm trying to get as close to 100,000 subscribers by the end of this year as possible. So if you have any ideas for videos or things you'd like me to talk about life here in Somalia, then please let me know. And I'll see you guys next Friday for another update here on the Sam of Somalia channel. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.